Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you tales of resilience, love, and personal growth. Today's story follows Madison, a wealthy heiress whose world is turned upside down by a betrayal from the two people she trusted most, her husband and her best friend. What begins as a love story quickly transforms into a journey of heartbreak, strength, and the ultimate fight for justice. Stay tuned as we delve into Madison's emotional journey, uncovering the profound lessons she learns along the way. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to start today's story. Let's begin. Madison Walker was the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. Not just because of her beauty, though her golden hair and striking blue eyes certainly didn't hurt, but because of the quiet confidence she carried with her. Growing up as the only child of the Walkers, one of New York's most prominent families, she was no stranger to luxury or privilege. Her parents had built an empire of businesses, properties, and investments that Madison was set to inherit one day. But despite all her wealth, she longed for something money could never buy: love. Over the years, Madison had become used to the attention of men in tailored suits, armed with charming smiles and honeyed words. Yet, she could always see through them. Their eyes betrayed their intentions, lingering too long on her watch or the logo on her handbag. They didn't see her as Madison, they saw her as a ticket to an easy life. After countless dates and empty conversations, she began to believe that genuine love might not exist for someone like her. That was until she met Ryan. Ryan Peterson wasn't like the others, a branch manager for one of her family's companies. He had earned her father's trust through hard work and integrity. When Madison first saw him at a charity gala, he was the only man in the room who didn't seem impressed by her wealth or reputation. While others swarmed around her, Ryan stood off to the side, quietly chatting with colleagues. There was a humility about him, a groundedness that intrigued her. Their first conversation was unremarkable, a polite exchange about the event and the company. But Madison found herself replaying it in her mind later that night, recalling the way his eyes met hers without hesitation, without calculation. Over time, their interactions grew more frequent. Casual chats at company events turned into long conversations over dinner. Unlike the others, Ryan didn't drown her in compliments or expensive gifts. Instead, he listened, truly listened to her dreams, her fears, even her silly jokes. For the first time in years, Madison felt seen. Her heart began to hope, cautiously at first, but hope nonetheless. Here was a man who treated her not as an heiress but as an equal. She began to imagine a future where love was not a transaction but a partnership. Yet, not everyone shared her optimism. "Be careful," Madison, her best friend Emily, would say, her tone laced with concern. "He's too good to be true. Don't rush into anything." Her parents echoed similar warnings. Her father, ever the pragmatic businessman, reminded her of how much she stood to lose if Ryan's intentions weren't genuine. Her mother, though gentler, shared the same unease, urging her to take things slow. But Madison waved off their concerns. "He's different," she insisted. "I know what I'm doing." And so, against the backdrop of whispers and doubts, Madison and Ryan's relationship blossomed. The more time they spent together, the more inseparable they became. He made her laugh in ways she hadn't laughed in years, made her feel safe in ways she hadn't felt since childhood. When he proposed one quiet evening in a candlelit garden, her heart fluttered with a joy she thought she'd never feel. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. In that moment, she was certain she had found her soulmate. Their wedding was intimate, a far cry from the grand spectacle her parents had envisioned. Madison wanted it to be about them, not their wealth or status. As she stood at the altar, looking into Ryan's eyes, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. For once, the doubts and warnings faded into the background. She was marrying the man she loved, and that was all that mattered. At first, married life was everything she had dreamed of. Ryan was attentive and caring, always finding little ways to make her feel special. He'd bring her breakfast in bed, hold her hand during long walks, and talk excitedly about their future. Madison thought she had finally found the love she had been searching for all her life. But as the months passed, small cracks began to appear. Ryan started working longer hours, often coming home late or not at all. When he was home, he seemed distracted, glued to his phone or lost in his own thoughts. Madison tried to brush it off. Maybe he was stressed, she told herself. After all, managing one of her family's companies was no small task. Yet, the unease lingered. Emily, ever the loyal friend, noticed it too. Madison, "You've been quiet lately," she said one afternoon as they sipped coffee in the sunlit corner of a cafe. Madison hesitated, not wanting to voice her fears. "It's nothing," she said, forcing a smile. "Ryan's just busy with work." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Just, be careful. Okay? You know I've always got your back." Madison nodded, appreciating Emily's concern but unwilling to let doubt cloud her happiness. She loved Ryan. She trusted him. And she wanted to believe that their love was strong enough to withstand any challenge. Still, as she lay awake in bed at night, waiting for Ryan to come home, a small seed of doubt began to take root in her heart. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the fairytale she had worked so hard to build might not be as perfect as it seemed. And yet, she pushed those thoughts aside. Love, she told herself, wasn't easy. It required patience, understanding, and faith. So she resolved to hold on to the man she had chosen, the man she believed in, even as the shadows of doubt began to grow. To Madison, love was worth the risk, even if it meant risking her heart. Madison's life took an unimaginable turn one rainy evening in late autumn. She was returning home from a charity event, her heart still warm from the stories of people she had helped. The rain poured relentlessly, turning the New York streets into slick mirrors of blurred lights. Her driver, skilled but cautious, could barely see through the windshield. Madison stared out of the window, lost in thought. When it happened, a car sped through an intersection, its headlights cutting through the downpour like daggers. Before anyone could react, the vehicle slammed into hers. The force was deafening, a cacophony of shattering glass and screeching metal. The world seemed to flip upside down. And then, suddenly, everything went black. When Madison woke up, she was engulfed in silence and darkness. Panic gripped her chest as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Her body ached, and her mind raced. She reached out, desperate for something, anything that could ground her. A gentle touch on her hand startled her. It was a nurse, carefully guiding Madison to understand her new reality. The accident had left her blind and deaf. Her world shrank to a silent, pitch-black space, a void where she could no longer see the faces of her loved ones or hear their comforting words. Independence, something Madison had always prided herself on, vanished in an instant. She was utterly reliant on others, unable to perform even the simplest tasks without help. Ryan visited her in the hospital. But something felt different. Gone were the tender words and the comforting touch she had grown used to. His visits were brief, his tone detached, as though he were fulfilling a duty rather than offering genuine care. Madison felt it, even without her senses. The once loving gestures, the soft brush of his hand against her cheek. The way he would hold her close had been replaced with hurried pats and hollow hugs. Despite his coldness, Madison clung to the hope that this was temporary, that her husband would return to the man who had made her believe in love again. But as the days turned into weeks, that hope began to waver. When she was finally discharged from the hospital, her once bright and lively home felt foreign. She couldn't see the warm tones of the furniture or hear the comforting hum of the city outside. The silence was oppressive, the darkness unrelenting. Her world was a prison, and the memories of her former life were the only things keeping her from breaking entirely. Ryan's behavior grew more distant. He would leave early in the morning and return late at night. Sometimes not at all. Madison would wait for him, her heart aching with loneliness. But he rarely came. And when he did, it was as though he couldn't bear to be near her. She felt like a ghost haunting her own home, a shadow of the vibrant woman she had once been. Emily, her best friend, became her only source of comfort. She visited regularly, bringing small gifts or simply sitting with Madison in the silence. At first, Madison found solace in Emily's presence. She was the one constant in a world that felt like it was crumbling. But over time, even Emily's visits began to feel different. Madison's heightened senses picked up on subtle changes. The scent of Ryan's cologne would linger when Emily was around. There were soft whispers and footsteps too close together. Muffled sounds that hinted at a connection Madison couldn't yet see but deeply felt. One evening, as Madison lay on the couch, the smell of Ryan's cologne filled the room. She felt Emily's hand leave hers abruptly, followed by hurried whispers. Madison tried to turn toward them, but Ryan brushed her hand away, murmuring gently, "Just rest, my love." The next morning, Emily was gone, and Madison's suspicions grew stronger. She began to sense a closeness between her husband and her best friend that felt impossible to ignore. Emily's visits became more frequent, her presence lingering long into the evenings. Even when Ryan wasn't home, and when Ryan was home, he barely acknowledged Madison. Madison wanted to confront them, to demand answers. But how could she? She couldn't see their faces or hear their voices. She was trapped in a darkness and silence that seemed designed to hide the truth from her. Yet, even in her isolation, Madison's mind began to sharpen. Though her senses were dulled, her intuition grew stronger. She started to piece together the small moments, the lingering scents, the whispered words. Doubt gave way to suspicion, and suspicion to a quiet resolve. Madison may have lost her sight and hearing, but she hadn't lost her ability to think. And deep down, she knew that something wasn't right. Her heart ached at the possibility of betrayal. But if she was to uncover the truth, she would have to rely on something more powerful than sight or sound, her will. For now, she stayed silent. But her mind was anything but. Madison's life had become a quiet, empty routine, punctuated only by the echoes of her own thoughts. But in her silence and darkness, something within her began to stir. Her senses, though robbed of sight and sound, grew sharper in other ways. She began to notice patterns, small inconsistencies in Ryan and Emily's behavior that painted a larger picture, one she was hesitant to face. It started with the whispers. Madison couldn't hear them clearly, but she could feel the tension in the air when Ryan and Emily were together. Their interactions became more frequent, their movements more synchronized, and their presence more palpable. She felt Emily's hand brushing against Ryan's arm a little too casually, their lingering closeness when they thought she wasn't aware. And then there was the laughter. Not hers, she hadn't truly laughed in months, but theirs. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. It sent a chill through her, not because of its sound but because of its meaning. The lightness in their shared moments felt heavier to her than any silence. It was the laughter of people who shared a secret, one they were trying to hide from her. Madison's suspicions deepened one evening when she sensed both Ryan and Emily near her. She couldn't see them, but the scent of his cologne mingled with her best friend's perfume, filling the air with a strange blend of familiarity and betrayal. She felt Emily's presence leave her side and move closer to Ryan. There was a pause, followed by a whispered exchange she couldn't decipher. Then, silence. "Rest, Madison," Ryan said softly, his voice dripping with a sweetness that felt like a mask. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind refused to let go of the growing doubt. She replayed every interaction, every moment, searching for clues. She had trusted these two people more than anyone else in the world. Yet now, they seemed to be moving in a direction that excluded her entirely. Her suspicions were confirmed the following week. Madison, seated on the couch, sensed Ryan and Emily's presence in the adjacent room. The faint sound of their voices reached her, and though she couldn't hear every word, she strained to catch fragments of their conversation. "Did you get her to sign the documents?" Emily whispered urgently. "Not yet," Ryan replied, irritation lacing his tone. "She's hesitant. But it doesn't matter. Soon enough. She'll sign everything over. Once she does, it's all ours." Madison's breath caught in her throat. The weight of their words hit her like a blow. This wasn't just a betrayal of love, it was a betrayal of trust. A calculated effort to strip her of everything she owned. Her husband and best friend weren't just having an affair, they were conspiring to take everything her family had built. As they continued their hushed discussion, Madison felt a surge of emotions: anger, heartbreak, disbelief. But above all, she felt resolve. She wouldn't let them succeed. She couldn't. They thought she was weak, helpless, blind to their schemes. But they had underestimated her. The next morning, Madison called her lawyer, Mr. Carter, in secret. She carefully explained her suspicions and requested copies of every important document: business contracts, property deeds, financial records. She had a plan, one that required precision and patience. She would give Ryan and Emily exactly what they wanted: her signature on the documents. But what they didn't know was that every paper would be a fake, carefully crafted to look legitimate but ultimately worthless. In the days that followed, Madison played her part perfectly. She remained quiet, compliant, and seemingly unaware. When Ryan brought her documents to sign, she acted hesitant, her hands trembling slightly as she fumbled with the pen. "Don't worry, love," Ryan said, his voice gentle but laced with condescension. "It's just routine paperwork. Nothing to stress over." Madison nodded, feigning trust, and signed each document with calculated precision. With every stroke of her pen, she felt a growing sense of satisfaction. Let them think they were winning. Let them believe they were fooling her. Ryan and Emily grew bolder, their confidence swelling with each fake signature. They became more open about their plans, speaking in hushed tones when they thought Madison couldn't hear. Emily would bring over stacks of papers, her smirk barely concealed as she handed Madison the pen. "It's just formalities," Emily said one afternoon, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Madison played along, signing the fake documents with the air of someone resigned to her fate. But inside, she was anything but resigned. Every stroke of the pen was a step closer to revealing the truth and reclaiming her life. Though the betrayal stung deeply, Madison channeled her pain into determination. She had lost her sight and hearing, but not her mind or her will. If Ryan and Emily wanted to play games, she would let them. But she would make sure the final move was hers. And when that moment came, Madison promised herself it would be worth every ounce of heartbreak they had caused her. The weeks crept by, each day bringing Madison closer to the moment of truth. She played her role flawlessly, continuing to feign helplessness while gathering the final pieces of her plan. Ryan and Emily, emboldened by what they believed to be Madison's ignorance, acted with increasing audacity. Their confidence only fueled her resolve. Then came the day Madison had been waiting for. As she sat in her living room, quietly sipping tea, Ryan entered with Emily trailing closely behind. The tension in the air was palpable. Madison felt their gazes on her, heavy with purpose, and she knew that this would be the day they would try to seal her fate. "Madison," Ryan began, his tone oddly formal. "We need to talk." She placed her teacup down slowly, keeping her expression neutral. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady but faint, still maintaining the facade of vulnerability. Ryan cleared his throat. "You've been through so much since the accident. And I've been thinking about what's best for everyone involved. I believe it's time for a change." Madison tilted her head, feigning confusion. What kind of change? Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Emily stepped forward. Her arms crossed. Her expression sharp. Madison. We think it's best if you find somewhere else to stay. Somewhere quieter. Where you can focus on healing. Find somewhere else? Madison repeated softly, her voice trembling just enough to sell her role. Ryan nodded. His expression carefully crafted to appear sympathetic. Yes. We've already arranged for a modest place for you to move into. It's comfortable. And you'll have everything you need. Emily chimed in, her tone dripping with false concern. It's for your own good. Madison. You'll be better off there. Madison took a deep breath, letting her hands tremble slightly as she clasped them in her lap. This is my home, she said quietly. Where would I go? Ryan exchanged a quick glance with Emily before responding. We'll help you transition, he said. We've already taken care of everything. You just need to trust us. Emily placed a hand on Madison's shoulder. The gesture meant to convey reassurance. But it only cemented the depth of the betrayal. Here stood the woman Madison had once called her best friend, now eagerly conspiring to take everything she held dear. Madison nodded slowly, pretending to accept their decision. If that's what you think is best, she whispered, lowering her gaze. Ryan's shoulders relaxed, and Emily smirked, clearly satisfied that their plan was progressing smoothly. Without hesitation, they began packing Madison's belongings, moving through her home as if it were already theirs. It wasn't long before Ryan approached her with another stack of papers. Just a few final signatures, he said, holding out a pen. Madison hesitated, her hand hovering over the pen as if unsure. What are these for? Just formalities. Ryan replied, his voice soothing but hollow. It's nothing to worry about. She took the pen with a trembling hand and began signing, her strokes deliberate and slow. She glanced up occasionally, noting the triumphant glint in Ryan's eyes and the barely concealed excitement on Emily's face. When the last document was signed, Ryan exhaled in relief. It's done, he declared, folding the papers neatly. Everything is officially ours. At that exact moment, a sharp knock sounded at the front door. Ryan and Emily froze, exchanging confused glances. Madison remained seated, her expression unreadable. Who could that be? Ryan muttered, rising to answer the door. As he opened it, 2 police officers stepped inside, their expressions stern. Behind them stood Mr. Carter, Madison's lawyer, holding a briefcase and wearing a grim look of determination. Mr. Peterson, one of the officers, said firmly, "We have reason to believe you've committed fraud and theft against Mrs. Madison Walker. We're here to investigate." Ryan's face turned pale. There must be some mistake," he stammered, his voice faltering. The officer stepped forward. "We'll need to see the documents you've collected and any other evidence." Ryan turned to Madison, his face a mixture of shock and betrayal. "Madison, what's going on?" She stood slowly, her expression calm but filled with an unmistakable strength. "Don't look so surprised." "Ryan," she said, her voice steady. "Did you really think I was so blind and deaf that I wouldn't see through your lies?" Emily's face twisted in anger as she stepped toward Madison. "You tricked us," she spat. Madison met her gaze without flinching. "You betrayed me," she replied coldly. "I trusted you. Emily. Both of you. And this is how you repay me? By plotting to steal everything I've ever worked for?" The officers examined the documents Ryan had presented, their expressions hardening as they realized they were fake. "These documents are fraudulent," one of them said. Ryan turned to Emily, panic etched across his face. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he hissed. "You said we had everything under control." Emily shook her head, her confidence crumbling. I thought we did." Madison watched them unravel, her heart heavy but resolute. She had given them the chance to prove their love and loyalty, and they had chosen greed instead. "Take them away," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of finality. As the officers handcuffed Ryan and Emily, leading them out of the house. Madison felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. She had won. But at what cost? She stood at the doorway, watching them disappear into the distance. And for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of peace. Justice had been served, and her home was finally hers again. As the police car disappeared down the quiet suburban street, Madison stood in the doorway, letting the moment wash over her. The house, once filled with tension and deceit, was now quiet and still. The weight of betrayal had been lifted, but it left behind an ache that lingered deep in her heart. Returning to the living room, Madison sank into the couch, her mind replaying the events that had unfolded. Ryan and Emily, two people she had trusted above all else, had shattered her world. She had loved Ryan, believed in him, and dreamed of a life built on mutual respect and care. She had shared every secret, every hope, and every vulnerability with Emily, only to discover that her best friend had exploited that trust for her own gain. For a long time, Madison sat in the stillness, letting her emotions surface. There was grief for the love she had lost, anger at the betrayal, and even guilt for not heeding the warnings of those who cared about her. But as she allowed herself to feel everything, a new sensation began to emerge, a quiet, unyielding strength. The following morning, Madison met with her lawyer, Mr. Carter, over coffee at the large oak table in her dining room. They reviewed the steps she had taken to protect her assets. "You handled this situation with extraordinary courage," Mr. Carter said, his tone warm but professional. "You didn't just safeguard your wealth, you reclaimed your dignity." Madison offered him a faint smile. "It doesn't feel like a victory," she admitted. "I've lost people I cared about. People I thought I could trust." "That's understandable," he replied. "But betrayal doesn't define you. How you rise from it does." Those words resonated with Madison. She realized that while she couldn't change what had happened, she could decide how it shaped her future. In the weeks that followed, Madison focused on rebuilding her life. She returned to the projects she had put aside, charity work that had always brought her a sense of purpose. Volunteering at shelters and community centers helped her reconnect with the values her parents had instilled in her: kindness, empathy, and resilience. Her home, which had felt cold and foreign after the accident, slowly began to regain its warmth. Madison redecorated, filling the space with light, fresh colors, and reminders of her new beginning. Friends and family visited often, offering support and encouragement. Madison, her mother, said one afternoon as they sipped tea in the sunlit kitchen, "You've been through so much, but you've come out of it stronger than I ever imagined. Your father and I couldn't be prouder." Madison smiled, genuinely this time. "Thank you, Mom. It means everything to me to hear that." Though her recovery was slow, Madison began to feel a sense of wholeness returning. Her senses, though not entirely restored, improved gradually, and with them came a renewed appreciation for the simple joys of life. She cherished the scent of fresh flowers in the garden, the soft texture of her favorite blanket, and the faint sounds of birds chirping outside her window. She also took time to reflect on the lessons the experience had taught her. Trust was a precious gift, one to be given carefully. Love, she realized, wasn't just about grand gestures or poetic words, it was about integrity, loyalty, and the courage to be vulnerable without fear of exploitation. One evening, as Madison sat in her living room watching the sunset through the large bay window, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The fiery hues of the sky reminded her of the resilience she had discovered within herself, a strength that no betrayal could extinguish. In the quiet of that moment, she allowed herself to dream of the future. She wasn't sure what it would hold, whether love would find her again or whether she would stand alone, but she was certain of one thing: she would face whatever came with the same determination and grace that had carried her through the darkest days of her life. Madison's story wasn't one of revenge or bitterness. It was a story of survival, of reclaiming her identity, and of learning to value herself beyond the roles others assigned to her. She had been betrayed. Yes. But she had also discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Madison rose from her seat and walked through her home. Her steps steady and sure. The past would always be a part of her, but it would not define her. She had chosen to rise, to rebuild, and to embrace the promise of a new day. And in doing so, she knew she was ready to move forward, one step at a time. As Madison stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her journey had been one of heartbreak and betrayal, but also resilience and growth. She had faced the depths of despair and emerged stronger, more self-assured, and ready to embrace the future. Madison knew that her story was far from over, but she was determined to write each new chapter with courage and hope. Her experience taught her that life's trials often lead to unexpected strength. And even in the darkest moments, there's a spark of light waiting to be found. With her heart open and her spirit renewed, Madison smiled, ready to take on whatever came next. If you found Madison's story inspiring, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt and powerful life stories. See you in the next video.